Welcome to the Curling for Change podcast. My name is Will Robertson, and I will be your host for this limited series, brought to you by Curling Canada and sponsored by the World Curling Federation. Without further ado, let's get right into today's discussion. Hello, everyone. My name is Will Robertson, and welcome to the Curling for Change podcast. Today's conversation is a special bonus episode. We've had one of these with Daryl Nowlin. We're now having one of these with Chelsea Carey, as you can see. And it's on a conversation that is probably more important than it has been in a while, but has always been incredibly important. And it's on sexism in curling, because curling, we need to talk. And so I'm really thankful to have Chelsea here. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Chelsea, and then we'll dive right into the questions.
Yeah, I'm Chelsea Carey. I've been to a couple of Scotties. I've won a couple of Scotties, and I've been lucky enough to be part of a few World Championships and a couple Olympic trials finals, and just living the dream as a curler.
Yeah, for sure, and something that, as a young person myself, I've watched come along. So this is a bit of a surreal thing for me. But in just starting our conversation, how did you originally come to the sport of curling?
I played every sport as a kid. My parents really believed in that. So we had to pick a sport for each season, but we didn't have to. If we didn't like one sport, we could switch to another one, but there had to be one for each season. And I was a competitive dancer until I was almost 20. But my dad won the Brier in 1992, and I was about 7 when that happened. And so watching him do that and win that, and the aftermath of it in a good way. Aftermath sounds like a bad thing, but in this case it wasn't. And I remember just thinking like that, maybe I could do that. That might be a thing. And so it ended up being my sport of choice. But yeah, I've been on the ice since I could walk. My dad and my uncle are both Canadian champions. My family obviously has been very involved in curling historically. So I always say I didn't have a choice, but no one else in my family got into it. None of my other cousins or my sister or anything. So I guess I did have a choice. I just didn't know it. But either way, it's worked out pretty good.
Yeah, a family affair. I think my dad always jokes about having curled in the oil fields, and then somehow I found it eventually. So different pathways, but we all get there.
we got to the same place. It's okay.
Exactly. So turning from obviously a very positive of where we've come into the sport of curling to the realities of sexism in curling. Maybe speak to when you first noticed sexism in curling and how that kind of appeared to you.
Yeah, I think the problem with me noticing it is that I didn't notice it in life. Mm-hmm. And I've been historically involved. My first job at a university was in a very male-dominated industry. So there was a lot of inherent sexism there that I just kind of got used to and didn't really notice in a way I should have, and didn't respond necessarily in a more forceful way, which I wish I had. So it took me a while to kind of get to the point where these little comments that seem, and I don't think most of them are coming from a malicious place, but it's not fair, and it's not done to the men, and it shouldn't be the case. But I think sexism in curling is no different than sexism in life. It's just people don't intend it to be a sexist comment, but it is a sexist comment, just and we kind of tend to let them slide too much, and now a spotlight's being put on it, which is good, and it's important because it is not the same. And I think the thing that got me, and it's still my biggest pet peeve probably, is that you should smile more, because it's okay for men to be serious and competitive and intense on the ice, but it's not okay for women. You should smile more, you should look nice, you should be friendly, but no one says that to the men. That's not a thing. So that to me is where I first, I guess, got, not even noticed it, but got frustrated by it. And then you start to see it. Once you see that, then the floodgates open. You start to see it in a bunch of other places, and the differences between the questions that are asked to the men and the women, and the comments that are made by, on social media, by fans, by people that are following it. They're different. The questions and the issues that are directed at the men are different than the ones that are directed at the women. So once I started to kind of be like, that's actually, it never occurred to me that it was sexist. It's just a question that bugged me. And then I watched a bunch of men's stuff and was like, does anyone ask the men that? And it turns out, no, they don't. They don't tell them they should smile more. It's not really a thing. but women are supposed to be nice and friendly and have a smile on their face like we're living in the 50s. And that's just insane to me, but it's still the reality of what happens.
Yeah, and one of the things I mentioned in our larger conversation was that, like, sometimes it's very difficult for people to see sexism in curling, racism in curling, what have you, for whatever reasons. They might not really get it. But then when you start asking the questions that you've just spoken to there of, well, would a man receive the same treatment for example, slamming a broom or yelling at
Exactly. Yeah.
or getting
Any kind
aggressive,
of display of emotion or intensity.
right?
I mean, it's no, and the same thing with like comments on fashion and comments on hairstyles and stuff. Like there's an example years ago of Eugenie Bouchard being asked to twirl at a, like, no man has ever been asked to do that, ever. No male in sports has ever been asked that. And that's just not right. And I don't think it's coming from a bad place. It's not malicious in nature, but it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it acceptable.
Yeah, and Laurie Saint-Georges spoke very eloquently to being called Elsa and a princess when she came to the Scotties. And I knew her when I was younger. We went to the same curling camps as junior curlers, and I had seen all of the background of how much work she had put in, how much her family had supported her, how much her team had worked to get to that point, and kind of sitting there being proud of her, and then seeing the media story turn entirely to, or she's a Disney princess. It's like, well,
yeah, because she happened to have her hair super blonde. And then when she dyed it dark, everybody was like, who is this person? We don't know her. Well, none of that should matter. Like, she's a shooter. She's a great shot maker. She's a great player. She's put in a lot of work. Like, none of that should be relevant, but that's exactly it. And that's just, and not that it never happens to men, but it's disproportionate, like extremely disproportionate, how often it happens to men versus how often it happens to women with questions to do with your appearance and your choice in fashion and your hair color and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, we have plenty of good-looking men in curling, but nobody's out there going, "Wow, Kirk Myers is Prince Charming, isn't he?" Just like, there's no
exactly.
Right?
They've never been likened to a Disney prince. That's just not something that happens. And again, it's just so easy to just be like, oh, that's just people like that. But it is just people, but it's a problem. It's something that we need to look at.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're talking about the kind of general side of it here, but Al Cameron from Curling Canada gave us some examples of emails he had received about women in curling that were unbelievably heinous in their nature, in terms of sexualizing female curlers, for example. And just like, this is like, we're not just talking about mild microaggressions or misogyny in curling or what have you. Like, there is some pretty egregious crap out there, and particularly with people on social media now. It's difficult to escape it, right? It's just all the time, right?
Absolutely.
So, kind of delving further into your experience, could you describe kind of two experiences you've had with sexism in curling? So, one that was particularly disappointing to you, or perhaps one where either it was addressed or someone changed, or kind of had come to a different point of view and might have been empowering or a positive reaction.
I think, I mean, the negative ones are endless, and for me, I try really hard to avoid it all. So Al probably knows more about what's been said about me. Not probably, Al definitely knows more about what's been said about me than I know, because I purposely try to avoid it, because there's no winning that. There's no like good side to looking at that kind of stuff. So I try to not see it, but standing up to it feels good. And not even standing up to it in a way where I'm calling somebody out, like in any kind of personal way, just my go-to line, and I don't mean to include him in a negative way, because I don't mean it that way, but they say you should smile more. And I say, really, when was the last time you told Kevin Cooey that? And everyone goes, oh, well, sorry, I didn't mean to be offensive. I'm like, I know you didn't mean to be offensive, but you were offensive. Yeah. And answer my question. Have you ever said that to him? No, of course you haven't, because that's not how it works. And it just makes them realize that in like unintentionally, they're doing this thing that they don't intend to do, but they should be aware that they're doing. So those have felt good in a few moments, just to kind of open people's eyes, because essentially that's all it is. And that's all we can really do to a large degree. is because some people will continue to say that stuff no matter what. And those ones are ones I write off and I'm just over it. I'm not even going to engage with that. But the ones that don't mean to, and then you say that to them and they go, oh, yeah, you're right. Then now I've opened somebody's eyes to what the issue really is. So those ones have always felt kind of good to me, and like it felt really bad. And then I got to kind of turn it around and then it felt really good. And I'm not sure I've had one in curling necessarily, other than one that always makes me feel good is the general consensus. And you can find clips of a number of different male curlers and female curlers saying it, that Don McEwen is the best lead in curling of either gender. And that to me is the kind of thing that we need to talk about. Like if you ask people who the best curler in history is, who's the GOAT? They probably will say Kevin Martin. They'll probably say Brad Gushue. Some people will talk about guys, you know, the Richardsons and stuff. But if you just leave it open and you don't say female, is anyone saying Jennifer Jones or Colleen Jones or all these people that need to be in that conversation? Probably not. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, I watched Andy Murray say, they said, I can't even remember what record it was. You're the first person to do this. And first player to do this. And he said, first male player, right? And moments like that to me are like, yes, like, thank you. Because at the end of the day, it's no different than inclusion for different races and for, you know, all that stuff and for LGBTQ community and everything. Like if the people that are privileged in that discrimination don't speak up to it, if it's only the oppressed people that speak to it, then it's never going to change.
Yeah.
So when I see men defend women and say things like that, that makes me feel really good. So that's for me the most positive experience I've had with it. And also the eye-opening, being able to just turn it around and say, like, I just want you to think about that for a second, because you didn't mean anything by that question. I know you didn't, but it underlying sexism in that question is very obvious once you actually stop and think about it. And most of the time that's the reaction I get, like, huh, yeah, you're right, actually never really occurred to me.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's interesting what you learn when you ask yourself the tough questions, right?
Exactly. And being in the position of somebody who, and it's the same, it's no different than any other marginalized community. I mean, if sexism is a huge problem, but we're not as marginalized as a lot of other populations are as females. So they deal with it all the time, and you have to just throw it back. And most of the time it's not intentional, but they need to be thinking about it. So it's our job to just be like, did you think about how that sounds? And now and then being part of those different communities, like I'm a big ally for to us LGBTQ plus, like a big group of my friends is, you know, are members of that community. I've been an ally for them for years. And so now when I hear people say stuff about them, I ask those same questions, just as like, you're not really being a devil's advocate, but you're just trying to generate some thought about the thing that just came out of your mouth that I know you didn't think about, but that is coming out a way that you don't mean it to, really, probably, hopefully.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I think one of the points we mentioned in our group discussion on this was, you know, allyship doesn't just stop when the difficult moment is over, right? Like,
absolutely,
you supporting your friends in that way, or men and the lives of women supporting them when they encounter sexism or whatever the case may be, that doesn't just, you know, stop and start whenever something is in the news or something is going on, you know, that may be more obvious.
Well, you can't say that yes, I'm an ally for this, and then watch people go against it and not do something or say something. You're not an ally, then you're not fulfilling that. Like, if you're going to say you're an ally, you have to be fighting it. You have to be actively fighting it. And so, you know, if you let it go by, if you're, you know, I've seen a whole bunch of memes and posts, like, if you're an ally and you're dating a guy who's homophobic, you're not an ally. And it's true. If that's not, if you really believe that, then why are you with that person? You can't pick and choose when you're going to be an ally of something. If you're going to do it, you need to do it. You need to support that community regardless.
Yeah, and to your point you made earlier about the perennial comment thrown at women in curling of, well, smile more, be a little happier. It's a competitive sport, but smile more. Like, I think that one of the best ways, and it's sad that this needed to be addressed that way, but Rachel Homan's team recently made
that was amazing.
A clip about this, pointing out
but it's accurate, and that's the kind of thing you need to make it comical and like so exaggerated for anyone to understand it, for anyone to really let it sink in. Like, this is what you actually want. And that's what I always say to people. I'm like, I'm by myself at the other end. So I should be standing there like this.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. And if they actually thought about it, they would realize that it's ridiculous, but they don't think about it. It's just something you say. And women get told that in life. It's not even just in curling. Like, you're walking down the street. Like, I get told that in a number of, I've been told that a million times in my life, not all curling related, but it shouldn't be said ever. And that's what I always say to men, even in non-curling context. Don't ever tell a woman she should smile more. Don't ever tell anyone they should smile more. It's up to them. It's their business. It's got nothing to do with you. Like, if you don't like how they look or how they are, or their mannerisms, then don't hang out with them. But that's not your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, from a personal perspective, and I mentioned this in our larger conversation, but I remember as a young person, like, I'm only 23, and I remember my first exposure to—
You're still a young person.
Exactly. My exposure to sexism for the first time in curling was you, in the sense that I remember your team going to Worlds, and I watch curling all the time. It's glued to the TV every time the curling season's around, and I had never seen any team of any type receive more vitriol and hate of the worst kind, period, than your team did going to the Worlds that year. And I was aware of sexism in my life and with people I knew, but I had never really seen it clearly in sport. In my experience, obviously, again, I'm speaking from a place of significant privilege in saying that. But that was kind of a punch to the gut to me, to be like, oh, wow, this is very much prevalent, very much here, and we really have to address this. And I was just wondering if you would like to speak to a bit of what that experience was like. It's something I've always seen and thought of, and I understandably would be incredibly difficult to endure, first of all. But I wondered maybe if you wanted to speak to that a little as that point.
Yeah, I think the thing that, and I've talked about it quite a bit because I don't think enough people talk about it, and it's the same as anything, any kind of discrimination, any kind of, you feel some shame, or you feel like you're not supposed to feel that. You're not supposed to feel like it's hard. Mm-hmm. Like, going to a world championship is all of our dream. Going to Olympics is all of our dream. Like, that's what we aspire to do. I spent my whole life trying to get to a world championship. I've dreamed of it since I watched my dad do it when I was 7. And so you think it's going to be this amazing, perfect experience. Mm-hmm. And then you get there and you have stuff like that to deal with. And it's just harder than anyone tells you it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunate, in the sense that, I mean, in a perfect world, it's not going to be, but it's never going to be as perfect as I thought it was going to be in my head, because I just, you build this thing up and that's what it is. But I think what we don't do enough of is exactly what we're sitting here doing right now, is talking about that. And so when other teams have gone, and when I've had the opportunity to speak to it or to interact with teams that were about to go for the first time, even my own teammates, like in 2019, they had never been to Worlds and I had, and I was trying to prepare them for the vitriol, which is the only word I can think of for it. And you said it, and I think that's accurate. And just how hard it is, the pressure and the hate and the awful things that people think they have the right to say to you, not to you, because they would never say it to your face, mm-hmm. but the awful things that they think they have the right to say on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and email and all this stuff. And that's why I purposely avoid most of it. Mm-hmm. But it just, and it's hard, because the challenge too is that there's just as many positive comments. There's probably way more positive comments than there is negative ones. But it's hard not to focus on the negative ones when they're a personal attack on you. Like, if you're going to talk about me missing a shot, then fine. I'm mad. I'm more mad than you are. I guarantee I'm more mad than you are about the shot that I missed in 10 to win us that game, or whatever it was. Yeah. But to attack me on a personal level, to come at people about their weight and their hairstyle and their, she's a bitch and she's this and she's that, and like, mm-hmm. that is just not warranted. It's not necessary. It's not acceptable. There's just nothing okay about attacking these people as people when you don't know them as people. Just because you watch them on TV, everyone thinks they know you. But then people meet me in person and they're like, you're nothing like you are on TV. I'm like, yeah, do you know what I'm going through when I'm on TV? Like, do you know what we're trying to do? And like the effort and the concentration that takes? Of course I'm not. Because you're seeing me in the most intense moments of my life.
Yeah.
And when you're in a game and in that kind of situation, you do what you need to do to survive that and to thrive in that environment. And for most people, that's not smiling and laughing and, you know, licking a lollipop. That's just not how it is. But everyone thinks that that's what you should be like. So I meet people socially and we're like laughing and joking around and having a good time. And they go, oh, you're so different. Like, yeah, like there's no pressure on me now. I just get to hang out. This is awesome. It's hard to imagine how bad it is, how awful people are and the things that they say about you as a human, not about you as a curler.
Yeah. And thank you for speaking to that. Cause you know, I'm not even going to say I could understand. I couldn't because I've never been in those shoes. You know, just the level of which that would impact you and your teammates. And thank you for speaking to it after the fact, of course, because I think, as you said, it's incredibly important to talk about it. Because I just truly remember that being the first moment where I was like, I am disappointed in this community that I've loved so much. Right. And you know, as you mentioned, like this is something that people dream of. This is something that everyone wants to do. There is no greater honor than representing your country at a stage of that nature, period, no matter what the context is. And for it to be mired by that, like as you said, performance is one thing. Like we can deal with, okay, we didn't perform as well as we wanted to, writ large. Yes, that disappointment, that'll be one thing. But then for that other element of it, in terms of that sexism, in terms of that hatred that was directed towards you and your teammates, that is something that's just unacceptable, but also more prevalent than we would ever like to admit.
Yes, that's exactly the case.
Right. And so, you know, and it's moments like, you know, like that, but also there's been plenty of others where, you know, suddenly sexism is in our faces. And then we have the conversation. And again, to the point that you and I both kind of made, is that it's important to have these discussions outside of that, to be aware of it, because it doesn't go away. It doesn't hide under a rock while, you know, we're waiting for the next cycle. It, you know, someone's experiencing it, you know, as we speak. And so, you know, thank you for speaking to that, as I understand it would be, you know, obviously a difficult moment to kind of have gone through and really, you know, thank you for leading after that point as well, because I could totally understand receding from that and going, okay, this is how you've treated me. See you later. I don't need this in my life. So, you know, coming out of those experiences, you know, why do you feel it's important to address sexism in curling?
I think, I mean, I think it's important to address it in general, but in curling for the same reason. I think a lot of it is not intentional. And so it becomes more about education and about kind of throwing it back at somebody and being like, think about what you just said for a second. Like, would you have asked a guy that? And they just don't, most of the time they don't mean to. And like I said, the ones who mean to, I write off. I don't try to fix them. I don't try to talk about it. they're a lost cause to me.
Yeah.
But most of the time they don't mean it. But it's been laced into our culture for so long, and you grow up with this, like, oh yeah, girls sit over on the sidelines and boys play sports, and girls don't fight, but boys fight, and that's okay. And just none of that is right. But it's just there, and it's in everyone's psyche. And so they say things that they intend to be innocent. And they actually intend most of the time to be helpful. Like they think they're helping me by telling me to smile more because people will like me better. But what they don't realize is that that's a very sexist, like that's an offensive thing to say to somebody. And when you point it out, typically they can get there and kind of realize why they shouldn't say that. But it just comes out, and it's just been so socially acceptable for so long that no one thinks twice about it until someone says something. And then they backpedal like crazy. They usually get super defensive immediately. And then they kind of eventually come around to it and they're like, yeah, you're right, actually. And then now I've maybe made someone think twice before they say something like that again. So I think the reason that it's important to me to speak about, and I did do what you said, I did dissociate from it during those events because I had to, it was survival. but coming out of them and then going to the second worlds, knowing that was coming and trying to prepare my teammates and watching them go through it for the first time the same way that I went through it the first time, even though I tried to prepare them. I was like, we got to do something about this. There needs to be a bigger push to kind of end this. And so I think it's super important. And I watch other teams go through it. I watched Carrie Anderson's team go through it. And I spoke out about that as well, because it's just not okay. And people are just ripping on them on, like I said, performance is one thing. They won a bronze medal. Like, you can't even rip on the medal. They were on the podium. But they still got so much hatred about things that shouldn't matter, that aren't, there was a race issue in there. There was all kinds of stuff. And it's just like, so they can't say it because it'll just sound like sour grapes from them. So I said it because I wish that somebody would have said it when it was me going through it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely an important points around. And I think as well to Carrie Anderson's team, when we talk about privilege in terms of experiences of sexism or other things, of course, as you mentioned, there is the race element there in terms of, okay, well, they're going to represent the Métis Federation on their pants, as is their right, firstly.
Well, and Carrie Anderson is Métis.
Exactly, right? Right.
Not only their right, but actually the right thing to do. And also the first people in Canada, like, let's be clear, that's the most Canadian thing you could do in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and seeing some of the attacks that were directed on them of like, wow, you shouldn't have anything other than the maple leaf. It was like, okay, where has anybody written these unforeseen rules?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I can't with that one. That was tough to watch.
Now somebody has gone out and provided visibility to, as you mentioned, the Métis Nation of Canada in terms of Métis population is incredibly
Indigenous people in general. Like, this is a huge push right now. It's a huge thing, and we've done a terrible job of it so far. So like, this should be celebrated, that this is happening in curling. We should be celebrating that, and instead they're getting ridiculed for it.
Exactly. And communities, whether they be Indigenous communities or whether they be other marginalized communities, particularly again when we're talking about women in curling, women who are also in other marginalized communities as well, trying to get into curling, like, these are communities that we want to reach out to in curling writ large and welcome into the sport and support in the sport. And then here we are in an incredibly public way with people like in newspapers, a fair, significant, predominance in Canada, writing some pretty terrible stuff about them that was laced with sexism and racism, as you mentioned. And I do remember seeing you speak out on it, and I saw some others as well at the time. And those are the things that encourage me, is that we still have folks who are willing to speak out about it and have to, and it's important we do so. And I wanted to come back to something you had mentioned about your experience in 2019. How, firstly, how important was it for you, having gone through the experience the first time, prior to that, to prepare your teammates for that ridicule, that hatred, that vitriol? There's the difference between the ridicule of the performance and sexism outright, firstly. How important was that to you? And then secondly, like, how much preparation, like, are we talking, like, how much of a time commitment in terms of, like, I'm not asking for a number of hours, but how much of a commitment is it to prepare for that experience of what you're going to face when you're trying to go to what for many people is the biggest event they will ever be in?
Yeah, I wanted to prepare them. But the problem is that when I went in 2016, Amy and Lainey had been there before, and they tried to prepare Jocelyn and I, but you can't prepare somebody for it, no matter how hard you try, unfortunately. You can't prepare anyone for and it's not just sexism, and it's not just the hatred online and all that. It's just everything. It's just the whole experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And every time I talk about this, I get worried that people think I regret chasing it and going to Worlds, and I don't. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Wearing that maple leaf is the greatest thing I've ever done. It's the greatest honor I've ever had. I would not trade it for the world, but what I think the problem is, because everybody feels that way, they don't want to say anything bad about it. You're not supposed to say it was hard. You're not supposed to say you got hated on by people and that media was hard and that you were tired and that you're not supposed to say any of that. And so I was trying to prepare my teammates in the same way that Lainey and Amy tried to prepare me, but you can't. it's a losing battle, unfortunately. And because until you go through it, you don't know. What I did listen to, and when I went to Worlds my first time, that I'm not sure every teammate that I've, or every person, not even just my teammates, I've done this with other teams, is turning off all your social media. You have to try to get away from it, because it's just too hard. It's too awful and too hard to look at what the bad things, and you get sucked into it, and it's a bit of a wormhole, and you just, if you go down there, you're in trouble. And I mean, everybody's different, so you can't, I'm not trying to control what my teammates do with their off time either. Like, you do you, but I'm just saying, if I were you, I would turn off those notifications, kind of thing. And it's because it's too hard and too awful, and some of them will still get through to you. And like, the only reason I know about some of it is because I tried to turn off everything for the most part, but I did still end up seeing a few bad things that were said. But that's why you have social media people and you know, Curling Canada people. It's like, somebody else filter it so that we don't have to read it, because it's just like, it's actually hard to believe the things that people say.
Yeah, and especially when, you know, veiled with anonymity, right?
Well, that's the thing. Everyone's brave behind their keyboard, right? Like, no one walks up to my face and says any of that to me, but they'll say it behind the keyboard. And sometimes, and I don't see very many of them, but there was a few times, and Al would always scold me because I'm not supposed to be looking at it. I'm not supposed to be responding to it. But every so often I would see one and I would answer it, and basically just like very politely say, like, you know, sorry that disappointed you and blah, blah, blah. But like, as soon as you answer them, then they backpedal like crazy. The comment gets deleted. They go like, they don't actually want you to, like, they think they want you to see it. But then as soon as you do and you say something, they go, oh no, that's not what I meant. Well, yeah, it is actually what you meant. And you need to be called out on it sometimes. But it's hard for the athletes to be the ones who are doing that, because you're also trying to go and perform. It's just a lot to put on one person. And as far as like the amount of time to prepare for it, I can't put a number on it, because you can't, if you've never been before, I don't care how many hours you put in trying to prepare for it, you can't do it. You can't do it. It's an experience thing. And it bothers some people more than others inherently, just like the way they are. And I mean, I would encourage everybody who wants to go to an event like that to do all of the mental trainer side work, like all the sports psych and all that stuff, because that's what helps you get through it. It's trying to stay focused on yourself and in the moment, and the breathing exercises and all that. Like, that's what I did. And that's not that it was perfect, but it's the only thing that helped me get through it, because you can't stop any of that from being said, and you can't prepare yourself for what it's going to feel like. Even the second time, I knew it was coming and I still wasn't prepared. It's hard. So you have to find a way to get away from it, and stay in yourself as much as possible.
Yeah. And I think what, you know, some of what you spoke to in terms of the, you know, the human side of it, right, is like, yes, you know, there's an element of high performance athletes going to, whether it be a world event, a national event, whatever event it is, and focusing on what you need in order to perform well. That's the main thing, the main side of it, of course. You're also human beings.
Yes, that's the part that they forget. They forget,
right?
You're a person.
You know,
they just speak like this, you're this entity. And that's why sometimes when I answer them, they do this backpedaling thing, because they realize I'm an actual human who's reading their awful thing that they said about me. And then they go, oh no, I didn't mean that. Like, what if, like, this is someone's daughter, this is someone's sister, this is like someone's friend that you're saying this about. Imagine if somebody said that about your best friend. Like, how would you feel? Right. But they don't think about that. They just, you're an entity to them. And it's not specific to curling. It's every athlete, it's every public figure. They think they have the right to criticize you because they don't think of you as a person, even though they also think they know you as a person, because they make personal judgments about you based on what they see on TV, but then they forget that you're a human. It's a bit of a dichotomy, but that's how it is.
Yeah. And, you know, forgetting that they're a person, you know, but also not knowing what you're going through. Right. Like,
oh yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, you're really brave sitting on your couch. I watched the guys try to do the run the marathon. I'm like, well, that guy's slow. Yeah, watch me try to run a marathon. That wouldn't go very well. Like, they don't get it, but they forget that they don't get it because they watch professionals do it every day, and then they think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's one thing for people sitting at home watching curling to kind of forget that you're a person in addition to a curler, but also, you know, even in your clubs or in your life outside of curling or in your local area or what have you, like, anybody who comes into your curling club or anyone who you encounter, whatever you may think, whatever your initial prejudice is, whatever that may be, at the end of the day, you don't know who they are. You don't know what they've gone through. You don't know you don't know what's happened before you've seen them. And,
No, you have no idea.
just to remove that and go, here's my judgment, and this is all I'm going to say, and this is all I'm going to think because it upsets me, it annoys me, I don't like it, whatever. And then to totally remove, as you said, that human element of it, is something that's more common than anyone would really like to admit. Social media, case in point, but also personally, we're looking at curling community where, yes, we are getting better, and yes, curling is better than other sports, but sexism is still incredibly prevalent and has been for a very long time. Racism still prevalent, has been for a very long time. I grew up curling in Atlantic Canada, and it took me almost a decade to encounter a curling event where there was a person of color.
I still have been to very few, and I've been playing my whole life.
Right.
And I'm actually on the board for the Blackrock Initiative, because I think it's important. And when I went to the interview for the board, Andrew Paris said to me, have you ever, do you know what this term means? Have you ever experienced this? And I was like, yeah, not to your degree, but women do get this. This is a thing that we experience as well. And that's why I want to fight against it, because I don't want anyone to have that. I don't want anyone to feel that. And women, it's nowhere near as bad for us as it is for some marginalized communities, especially in curling and golf, and some of these that are white people sports. We want to change that. I think we should want to change that. So anyone who doesn't, I need to have a conversation with, I guess. But in my mind, we want to change that. We want to welcome people into it because it's such a cool thing. It's such a niche Canadian sport. It's awesome. So why wouldn't we want new Canadians to go and do that and experience that and be part of it? It's fantastic, but we have to work at it because right now they don't feel welcome.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, Chelsea very much said white people sport in air quotes. So just to be clear for anyone listening and not watching.
Sorry, yes, I did air quote
that. To be clear, and yeah, the traditionalism in curling, whether it relates to women participation in curling, whether it's related to Indigenous peoples in curling, or racialized persons in curling, or newcomers to Canada, there is an element of that traditionalism that some people are like, well, that's key to curling. We gotta stick to our roots. Well, yeah, some of those roots are problematic, at a minimum.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about that and asking those hard questions, and as we mentioned, and seeing not a lot of racialized people in curling. Well, in your communities, in your curling clubs, have you asked the question of why those communities aren't there or represented in your club, or why they may not feel welcome? If you don't have a lot of women in your leagues, for example, maybe ask why. What is preventing people from feeling welcome in those spaces? And you can apply that to any marginalized community whatsoever of, well, we're in a sport that's not growing rapidly. Clubs are struggling.
Not in Canada.
Right?
Yeah.
And, some of these clubs that are struggling are also clubs that go, well, we should stick to our tradition. Well, maybe you should think about being more inclusive and changing the ways we think about how curling is. Why are things gendered? Why do we hug to traditionalism as much as we do? In some of these questions. So, that plays into.
I think there's some value to some traditions. I like that. I like the shaking hands before and after the game. That's an etiquette thing, and that's and leaving. There are some traditions that are great traditions. But the ones that exclude people, I just don't think that we need to go that way anymore. And I think that we're making a mistake by doing it, and we're limiting our reach and limiting our popularity and everything by doing that. And the future of the sport is going to depend on not limiting that. So we keep saying, why isn't it growing? Well, it's not that hard to look around and be like, have we ever reached out to this community of people? Have we ever focused on getting new Canadians into a curling club and showing them what curling is? It's so quintessentially Canadian. I mean, it's not historically, but we know it is for our purposes. So why wouldn't we want them to do that? It's the same as hockey. Why wouldn't we want to make hockey inclusive? We want everybody to do that because it's so Canadian, and we want them to be part of it. I mean, that's the point. And that's what we're missing. We're not trying, like you said, it's like we go, yeah, no, so we're registration's down. We don't have a lot of women. We don't have a lot of any kind of marginalized community. Well, why not? Why? Curling's affordable. It's reasonably cheap compared to other sports. It's a great social activity. Like, why wouldn't we want these people to come play in a league? It's better for the club. It's better for them. It's better for the membership. It's just, there's no downside.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've very eloquently spoken to your experiences, but also to, allyship with other communities and some of the things that we can do, and why it's important to address sexism in curling. Where do we go from here? What can we do to address sexism in curling, to hopefully one day eliminate it, perhaps, and make curling a more inclusive sport for everyone?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is awareness and talking about it, and we're doing a bit better job at that now. But I think that it comes down to, in a number of ways, of like trying to eliminate sexism in general, because I think a lot of the comments that are made about curlers, about female athletes, but especially female curlers, are more just generic comments that get made to women all the time that shouldn't, like smile more, like that kind of stuff. But I think we also need to be looking at things like the curling club I grew up in, which I love. They didn't used to have a women's dressing room. And I understand that when the club was built and all that, there was no women that were curling. That was not a thing that was allowed at the time. And so the men have this huge dressing room downstairs. I don't think it still does, but at one time it had saunas and hot tubs and stuff down there. And the women had, eventually, by the time I got old enough to be in there was the old pro shop. There used to be a golf pro shop. They turned it into a dressing room. It's not a dressing room. It's a bathroom with this little tiny room, and they stuffed some lockers in it, and it's a joke. And so there's still a lot of that with curling clubs. And I understand curling clubs don't have big budgets to go renovating and things, but those little things make a big difference as far as people, how welcome they feel in that space. And then on a bigger scale, like I said, I mean, trying to reach out to racially marginalized communities, to new Canadians, to all of these people, I just think that there's been little to no effort made in general by the curling community in that sense. We all say it's inclusive, and I think that people mean it in generally, but we're willing to include them, but we're not doing anything to try to draw them in. Like we're not approaching them. We're not making it an option for them, like that's in their face, that like, you should come try this. Like here, like, no, I'm not just saying you're welcome, but I'm going in there, walking in there and closing the door in your face. I'm saying, like, I'm standing here, hey, you come in here, like, let me show you this. And I just think there's not been enough effort made in that sense. I think from the sexism standpoint, we've done a decent job. Like you said, it's better than other sports. I just think that what's left inherently sexist in curling is what's inherently sexist in life. The little side comments and the comments on people's appearance more than the men and that kind of stuff. We just need to call people out on it. Like, it just needs to be talked about that we can't do this. So when it happens, it needs to be said, and not always by the woman, by somebody else in the scrum, by somebody else who's standing there watching it, preferably by a male, because unfortunately, like I said, as the marginalized community, your voice is never going to be as loud as the people that are sitting in privilege benefiting from it. So if those people speak, which in this case is men, if they speak, it will gain traction a lot quicker. So if I stand in the scrum and someone tells me I should smile more, or if a fan tells me that, and a male curler or a coach or somebody that happens to be walking by says, like, really, do you say that to the men? And they have to like take a pause and go, no, I guess I haven't. The more times that happens, the better off we'll be. So I think sexism in general is more, it's as much in curling as it is in life. It just needs to be called out more often. Like, not by more often, I mean all the time. Like, every time somebody says something like that, someone needs to say something. Like, don't say that. Same as a derogatory term. Like, we don't call certain races by certain words that we used to use very commonly, because it was like, no, that's not acceptable. We have to stop that. We have to treat everything, and not just sexism, we have to treat everything that same way, where it gets called out when it's done, because I really think most of the time it's not intentional necessarily. It's just something that they don't think twice about until you make them stop and think.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. I think, it's everybody's responsibility to make curling a more inclusive space, but also to genuinely be more inclusive to other people. you know, some folks have said, it's about being kind, it's about being empathetic, it's about, placing your biases on the table and saying, for example, I am a cisgender white man of relative privilege for a whole plethora of reasons. But I've made the choice to say, okay, let's have these conversations and facilitate these conversations and learn more and try to help others learn more. And the thing is, everyone can do that in your own way, in your own life.
Absolutely.
Right.
And everyone should do that. You grow as a person when you do stuff like that because you put yourself in someone else's shoes. I work for Kidsport Alberta now, and I've been an ambassador for them for years because I came from, I'm the same. I mean, I'm a female, but that's the only discrimination I've ever faced in my life because I'm white and came from a middle-class family and all the things. But when it occurred to me, because it never even occurred to me, we got to play every sport as a kid and we never had to worry about, you have to be in sports, whatever. My parents paid for it. We weren't rich, but they valued that so much that we never had to worry about the cost of it. And then when I started hearing about Kidsport and what they did, it started occurring to me that there are people who can't play a sport because they can't afford it. And that's just so sad to me and so wrong. And like, I want to fix that. The same as I want to fix somebody who sees a sport and thinks it's cool, but doesn't feel welcome in that space. That's not what we want. Like, everyone should be welcome here. We should be not only welcoming them, we should be trying to like hustle them in the door. Like, let's not only welcome them, but let's foster this. Let's like do everything we can to bring these people in. And because curling is such a great community. And that's the part that I think, and I think the conversations are important, but I don't want to forget how great curlers are as people. But why not use that? Why not bring more people into that? Let's introduce everybody to that. New Canadians and racialized people and women and, the 2S LGBTQ, like all of these people, we should be welcoming them. Like, my arms are open, let me hug you. This is a great space for you. Come in.
Yeah, and welcoming them as best we can, and then making sure they stay, in the sense of,
well, because they'll stay if they feel welcome once they're in there.
Right.
So we need to create a culture where they feel welcome once they're in.
Precisely.
It's not an issue of walking into a curling club, but it's an issue of the fact that when you walk in, Andrew talked about walking into a curling club, like, and feeling so out of place because everyone kind of stared at him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what we want. That's what we need to get away from. And that's, the whole point. And yeah, women aren't as bad off as some other communities, but still, I mean, all of it needs to just needs a spotlight on it. It needs some attention, and we're doing a better job of that, but we can't let our foot off the gas, I don't think, because it goes back pretty quick if you don't keep the attention on it. Like you said, with allyship, like it's fine when it's Pride Month and everyone's a big ally, but then what happens in August when it's not Pride Month? Like, how do they get treated? And that's not okay. So we need to keep the spotlight there and create a different culture that welcomes these people willingly and fully. Because I don't know that necessarily is the case. I think it generally is everyone's sentiment, but I'm not sure it comes off that way sometimes to some newcomers that aren't your traditional curler.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to place the spotlight on this issue in particular with sexism curling, but we've touched on so many others as well, which are all incredibly important conversations. And thank you for trusting me and having that conversation. I really appreciate it. I know plenty of people listening and watching will appreciate it as well. So thank you, Chelsea, for joining me on this. And to anybody watching or listening, if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you think it was impactful, if you'd like others to listen to it as well, please do share it, like it, send it to someone you know, send it to someone you might think needs to hear it, firstly. I greatly appreciate it. And anyway, this has been a bonus episode, a very special bonus episode to me, firstly, of the Curling for Change podcast. Thank you to everybody who listened. Thank you, Chelsea, again for joining me. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching this episode of the Curling for Change podcast, brought to you by the World Curling Federation and presented by Curling Canada. My name is Will Robertson, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please do consider giving it a like, a share, or to subscribe on YouTube for future episodes. As always, you can find it in video every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern on Curling Canada Plus and on audio format wherever you find your podcasts, and will always come out for free on YouTube a week later. Take care, and I hope to see you in the next episode.